Alright, what's going on, guys? Out of all the characters in Elden Ring Nightreign, it's pretty apparent that EXECUTOR stands head and shoulders above the rest in terms of cool factor. Ever since he was first shown, we knew this wasn't going to be just a standard archetype. EXECUTOR is trying new things, innovating on the way an Elden Ring character fights in general. There is nothing else like it. From the return of the deflect system to the Crucible Beast transformation, this is going to be a lot of people's go-to. And today I want to take a deep dive into this character, break down everything we know, how he plays, even the lore we have, so that the second Elden Ring Nightreign drops, you can start mastering this character. But as we get started today, if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring Nightreign, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. So before we dive into this, let me say a few things. First off, this video is going to be spoiler free. We did get a lot of new EXECUTOR gameplay today, but all the gameplay you're seeing is from the Red Bull event across various streamers' channels, and the quality is pretty rough, so just bear with me on this. Now I am also placing the general EXECUTOR info up there on the right, because they were using face cams and the Red Bull logo was on there as well, so that's just what we have to work with. And again, a lot of the footage from this event did have some pretty heavy spoilers, but this video is going to be solely about EXECUTOR, so don't worry. But let's start off by giving an overview of this character. EXECUTOR is a dexterity-based character, a sort of Crucible Knight samurai, and his character bio reads as follows. This condemned soul, with a body fused with a piece of armor, went missing after a prison stint in the lands between, brandishes a cursed blade that savors every battle, and he has a preference for katanas, specializing in dexterity and arcane. And from a story and lore perspective, that bio raises a lot of questions right off the bat. First of all, how did a soul get fused with a piece of armor? Why was he in prison? How did he get lost? And what is the curse on the blade? That's likely what we'll unravel throughout his remembrances, and that all sounds extremely cool. But an overview from the gameplay perspective, we can see EXECUTOR's stat distribution here, rocking a B in HP, a D in FP, a B in Stamina, C in Strength, S in Dex, D in Intelligence, D in Faith, and an S in Arcane. So this is a very specialized character. If you're playing EXECUTOR, you're going to need to be running Dex, and not diverging from that at all. Now for me, when I see this, immediately my mind wants to compare it to a character like Duchess, who is also a Dex specialist. However, when we look at EXECUTOR, his stats are noticeably much higher in regards to damage, while also boasting a bit more defense. However, Duchess picks up that lack in intelligence and faith, and with Duchess's skills, they fulfill different roles. So if you're primarily a Dex player, there are pros and cons to each one. EXECUTOR has the following abilities. The passive ability is Tenacity, which says, receive boost while recovering from status ailments, which is pretty self-explanatory. But then we have the main draw of this character, Cursed Sword. So you can press Y and LT to pull out the Cursed Sword and switch to this stance. Now you can wield it and attack with it, but in order to use this stance effectively, you will need to press LB to deflect. And during this you're basically playing Sekiro. You will need to time the deflect accordingly to the attack though. So simply holding LB to block is not going to use this effectively. And it does seem like all physical attacks can be deflected. However, large attacks from bosses, for example, will send EXECUTOR reeling back, and he'll do a little backflip. Now, when enough attacks are perfectly deflected, the shell on the blade will crack, and the sword will glow with this golden light. While it is in this state, you can still do light attacks with the weapon, and it will deal moderate damage, but holding RT will do a powerful uppercut attack that releases the energy of the blade, and bring it back to that shelled state. Now I gotta be honest, from all the gameplay we were seeing, this did not look easy to do. It definitely does seem like EXECUTOR is going to be a very high skill ceiling character that if you can truly master, you'll be able to dance through these fights. And the main reason for that is that the Cursed Sword stance does not have a cooldown. So there's a reality here where you could do an entire run with just the Cursed Sword if you're just a god at deflecting. Somebody out there's gonna be able to pull that off, and I cannot wait to see it. But the other major ability of EXECUTOR is Aspects of the Crucible Beast, which transforms EXECUTOR into this giant wolf creature. It has several attacks, including these ground swipes, which combo into a big slam. It also has a roar that is tied to LB, as well as a Crucible Horn attack. During this transformation, EXECUTOR's health bar is significantly increased. However, the player is not invincible. You can still die while in this transformation. From a DPS perspective, the damage put out by this transformation transformation is decent, but not a crazy amount. But this lasts for about 15 seconds, which is a good amount of time to either get boss damage in, use it to revive your teammates, or distract the boss, and according to the streamers it is pretty clunky to control. But the opportunities provided while in this state are what really give it utility, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. But one thing I do need to mention is that none of the streamers tried to use the roar or the crucible horn attack, so we don't have enough data on that to really see what the max DPS available is, so we'll have to wait for the final release to run the true numbers. Now, when in the actual game, like the other characters, EXECUTOR receives a unique moveset for katanas, with a special riposte and backstab animation where he throws a wheel kick before slicing with the blade. But the general katana moveset remains mostly the same, except the 2 follow-up slashes after the first attack are much faster. Now, one thing to keep in mind about these characters is that while they do have specific movesets for specific weapons, the stat scalings don't only apply to that type of weapon. Now, while he does prefer katanas, that S in dexterity is still going to apply to things like twin blades, daggers, curved swords, and scythes, so that's something you need to not forget about. But it's really making me wish great katanas were in the game, but unfortunately we don't have any DLC weapons, according to people that were playing early, which is a real bummer, but do remember that DLC for Nightreign is already confirmed. I'm sure that's where they'll be put in. So now let's talk some utility of EXECUTOR. When do you want to use him? How does he work on a team? And what are the strengths and weaknesses? Now first off, one thing that was pretty unanimous about everyone playing EXECUTOR was that while despite being a bit of a beefier dex build than Duchess is, he's still pretty squishy in comparison to all the other characters. So in order to really be an effective EXECUTOR, you have to be able to stand in the pocket and trade with the boss, but not actually get hit by the attacks, which makes the Curse Blade stance such an effective tool if you can master it, because you can constantly be deflecting the attacks and then sending that energy at the boss during the downtime. And then, like I said before, the Beast transformation doesn't just have to be a DPS tool. That is an excellent ability to activate when you're about to die outside of the transformation, or when your teammates go down, to give you that extra strength, that extra health bar to go revive teammates, or draw aggro if you need to. But that S and Dex, outside of the transformation, is going to make EXECUTOR a real powerhouse at dealing heavy damage with those Dex weapons. And we can't forget about the S and Arcane. That's going to build up status ailments on the bosses like crazy. Bleed, Scarlet Rot, you cannot forget about that, and that's something to consider outside of just the damage number of a weapon you're choosing, which is really going to make EXECUTOR that high skill ceiling character that can play both roles if you're truly effective with the build and the skills. So I do think that EXECUTOR has the potential to be one of the best characters in the hands of a master, but for someone picking it up for the first time, they're not going to know how to use all the tools. But that is EXECUTOR. What do you think about this character? Did it live up to all the hype? And do you think this is going to be the main for you? I can definitely see myself using this, but it's going to take a lot of practice. Either way though, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. Only a few more days to go, but I will catch you in the next one.